Hello ladies and gentlemen, Top Hat Gaming Man here. I was born in the year 1986, which meant I spent the majority of my childhood growing up in the 1990s, which on the whole was a magical period for me, I suppose. I was one spoilt little brat who essentially wanted for nothing. I had so many bloody toys, games, you name it, I had it. It was bloody brilliant, I suppose. But in retrospect, there was one thing that really annoyed me about growing up in that period. And that was essentially how bloody tubular everything was. It was bloody ridiculous. Like every mainstream media outlet, to television programme, to the adverts I used to watch on television, all essentially wanted to make me as bloody radical as possible. For some reason, they all wanted me to become this weird surfer dude. Like, nobody likes smelly campers, so why the hell did the mainstream media try and make me like that? It's bloody ridiculous. Like, I grew up in bloody London. I was nowhere near the sea. It's outrageous, really. Cornwall's, like, far enough away. That was like a 7-hour drive, and that was the closest place I could have got big waves if I really required them. But apart from that, I was nowhere near California. So why the hell was all the media what was being shoved down my throat? Like the Turtles, for example. Everyone's like, dude, no way. We're all going to talk in this really annoying accent and it sounds really uneducated. Why do we want our children to talk like this? Cowabunga, dude. Like, why? What was that about? Like, I will be honest, I really didn't like the Turtles. I know most people growing up appear to really like it, but for some reason, it just didn't click with me. I can't really say why, other than the fact, like I said, they talk like bloody idiots. But if I remember watching the programme, I just never found it entertaining. Like, every episode seemed to be boring, and every episode seemed to me like it was pretty much the same, and I just really didn't like it. I can't really put my finger on why, but it just wasn't an entertaining programme for me. After cutting the camera for a minute to try and reflect on perhaps why I didn't like the Turtles, I've come up with a few points. I suppose the Turtles themselves, I found very two-dimensional characters. Like, they didn't really have any particularly endearing factors about them. They were just very two-dimensional on the whole. And apart from that, if I'm going to watch a superhero programme, I like the villains to carry some level of threat with them. Like in Dragon Ball Z, for example. They can bloody destroy planets. But in bloody Turtles, the villains are essentially just a bunch of bumbling idiots. It's a waste of time. It'd be like having Boris Johnson as the main baddie. It'd be like watching the Power Rangers and essentially having Bulk and Skull as the main villains instead of Lord Zed, who did carry a lot of threat and credibility at points, I suppose. And apart from that, with the Turtles as well, watching the episodes, it seemed very formulaic. Like, every episode was the same. It was like watching like a superhero version of Wacky Racers where Dick Dastardly's always going to lose and you know he's exactly going to lose every single time. There's no point watching it because you know exactly what's going to happen. I know from when I've watched it at times they did mix up the formula a bit, but it was still stupid. Like, I saw one episode where they went to Bloody Island and again they was worrying about bumbling Shredder when really they should have been worrying about the IRA. So yeah, Turtles, I never liked it and I never really understood why other children liked it either. It was very lowbrow, I suppose. One thing what else used to annoy me about it is, it sounds very ungrateful, but I remember I'd always get gifts from like distant relatives and stuff of Turtles figures and all stuff like that, and I had nothing to bloody do with them. I hated the Turtles, as I said, but because of all that stupid radical tubular marketing, I had bloody Turtles toys coming out my ears. Speaking of the Turtles and surfing and all that sort of thing, another thing that the media was trying to do at the time, for some reason they was trying to get all children into skateboarding. Like, skateboarding of all things. Like, could you pick something more dangerous for children to do? Like, why did they want children to skateboard? Like, I broke bones as a child, like, messing about on skateboards. All my friends bloody broke bones on skateboards. Like, why were they encouraging children to ride skateboards? That's going to end badly, isn't it? Children are bloody uncoordinated. It's going to be a mess, isn't it? So yeah, there was obviously no health and safety back then either, so that was another problem with the 90s. They wanted children to essentially do very dangerous, stupid things. But yes, I suppose this skateboarding thing was all about the radical image, as I said, which we were supposed to aspire to over the time period. For some reason, in all media outlets, we was encouraged, for some reason, to be very naughty and misbehave for our parents and our school teachers, etc. Like, you tune into CITV and there'd be bloody programmes with names like Bad Influence. Like, what's that all about? Why would you want your children to behave bad? That doesn't make any sense. Like, I like to believe I was raised with very good manners, and I was very well behaved as a child, and I would not have liked to have stepped out of line. Why would I have done that? I've never wanted to do that. Like Bart Simpson, for example. Why are you trying to make that as a role model for your little children? Some stupid skateboarding little hooligan, essentially. And then you'd bloody watch The Simpsons, like I did when I was a child. And then when you watched it, Bart Simpson would end up being the most boring, two-dimensional character in the whole programme, even though he was the face of The Simpsons. In fact, he was such a boring character who was nothing more than essentially a marketing shill that years down the line they ended up making Homer the mascot of The Simpsons because that look became so dated essentially, and it was just like I said, two-dimensional. Everything they tried to throw at us at children was two-dimensional. Turtles, boring. Bart Simpson, a boring character. There's a trend going on there, I suppose. Now, I suppose, let's talk a little bit about gaming, which I suppose is the reason I would suspect most of you are here. One company who was certainly very much on the pulse in the early days of the 90s was Sega. Like, you couldn't get a company who were more mondo and radical and all of those stupid buzzwords like tubular than Sega were. Like, I remember my first experience, for example, with Sonic the Hedgehog would have been watching that god-awful cartoon they used to show. And it was just, again, it was like the Turtles. It was just rubbish. It was two-dimensional, and it was a programme which just bored the crap out of me. Like, chili dogs. Why did he eat chili dogs? Like, why? You're encouraging children to gorge on junk food then as well. Why are you trying to get children to eat crap? And again, the Turtles as well, that's uneducated too. They were trying to make children eat pizza. No wonder Jamie Oliver had to come along and save everyone, because the 90s did so much damage. So yes, anyway, back on the subject of gaming. I never actually liked the character Sonic the Hedgehog at first because he annoyed me due to his cartoon show. The first gaming experience I had with him was obviously on the first game on the Mega Drive, which I played round one of my playmates' houses. And at the time, I only had a microcomputer, so playing Sonic the Hedgehog on the Mega Drive literally blew me away. It was so much fun. I loved that game. But that did not take away from the fact that the character, as I said, rubbed me the wrong way a little bit. Like, when he stopped moving, he'd wag his finger at you with just showing off some bad, annoying attitude. Like, I literally wanted to jump through the screen and punch that little blue bastard in the face. Like, why was he so disrespectful? What was his problem? Why was he wagging his finger at you? Why? Why did every character who's aimed at us have to be so rude, disrespectful, and essentially disgusting? The 90s, it was just a weird time, wasn't it? And in the end, I think most people did see through this because it did end up backfiring, especially for Sega. So by the time 1995 came around, they were still going through that stupid marketing where everything would be bad attitude and all stuff like that. And that is, you could say, to some degree, that's why the PlayStation ended up overtaking them. Because the PlayStation had a more adult-orientated theme, where Sega, on the other hand, was still being, ooh, we're cool, we're bad, etc. So yeah, obviously, speaking of 1995, by that point it was obviously the Saturn period. So just touching on this point quickly, I've actually got a whole 30-minute documentary coming out on the bloody Saturn on this channel. So if you're new here, make sure you subscribe, because it might be the most in-depth piece I've made yet. But anyway, forgetting about the Saturn for a minute, let's go back to the Mega Drive. Obviously, I had a lot of fun playing Sonic, like I said. So I was at that point, I went home and I said, I really want to get a Mega Drive. But then my uncle lent me his Super Nintendo to play. And on that, that's when I discovered Super Mario, Starwing, etc. And from that point, I decided, you know what? I'm going to go for the Super Nintendo instead. These characters are far more wholesome, and they're not as in my face and irritating as these Sega hooligans. So yes, I suppose it's debatable that I went for a Nintendo console over a Sega one, simply because their marketing was a lot less obnoxious. Like their advertising campaigns were just nowhere near as annoying, I suppose. Like good old Rick Mel, for example, advertising the Nintendo products. That was a lot more endearing, I suppose. And my bloody friends at school, they didn't do Sega no favours either. Like, they used to be really obnoxious about the product. Like, their marketing, I suppose. Like, every bloody child who had a Sega, they were like, oh, my Sega's better than your Nintendo. And loads of nonsense like that, which clearly it wasn't, because the Mega Drive came quite a long time before the Super Nintendo. So the Super Nintendo, I suppose, is a better platform just because it's just that little bit newer, if we're going to look at it like that anyway. But that's a bit of a silly way to look at it at the same time, I suppose. But yes, anyway, as I was saying, there was lots of obnoxious Sega children, especially growing up in England, because as you will know through watching English YouTube channels, Sega absolutely trounced Nintendo over that time period here. Other than obviously in the handheld market, everyone still had Game Boys. But yes, I suppose speaking of annoying children in school, they all had that stupid 90s attitude. Maybe children are just annoying in general, but back then it was encouraged, I suppose, and it was just after the period, I suppose, where you could give them a good slap, because that had been outlawed as well. And yes, there was actually some child in my class, I remember. There was this horrible little Moroccan scrot called Amir. And I remember he had really expensive Nike trainers with covered in air bubbles and stuff like that. And all the children worshipped him because he had some expensive trainers. So do you know what I did? I went home and I got my mother to buy me an even more expensive pair of trainers with even more air bubbles. So, ha ha ha! Amir was king no more. I was the king of the classroom. Yeah. So yes, 90s England playgrounds were full of horrible little rapscallions who played their Sega consoles, collected Premier League stickers and gambled for bloody pox. It was a pretty radical, crazy time, I suppose. Which brings me on to another point, actually. If you watch children's television today, it is the complete polar opposite of what we got back then. It's all essentially really nice, wholesome entertainment. Which brings me to another point as well. Like, what's wrong with a happy medium? Like, why was we given all this, like, super bad attitude stuff, and today they're given this super wholesome stuff? Like, what's wrong with a little bit of reality for our youth? Something in the middle. Wouldn't that be nice? And a nice little bit of food for thought. Cheerio!